Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review for Eternals Issue 1. And I wasn't sure if I was going to be getting into this, but from the creative team that they had with Kieran Gillen and Esad Ribic, I'm like, yes please, because I liked Kieran Gillen's stuff with Thor and Iron Man, and Esad Ribic's work on Thor a lot. So I'm like, all right, I'll check this out, and I'm very glad that I did. This first issue is pretty big, kind of beefy, and like I'm not that versed in the Eternals lore in the Marvel universe and everything, and I think that this did a very good job of laying out that information in a way that yes, kind of comes off as exposition dumpy, but it's still entertaining to read because you've got a lot of the stuff with the artwork and they put enough movement in there that it's not like you're just sitting there getting force fed this information. It's stuff that you kind of need, and it goes at a nice, interesting journey to kind of get us into what's going on with the Eternals. So we're eased into this world because Icarus comes back up in this place called the Exclusion. And evidently, whenever the Eternals die, they get pretty much resurrected here at this place. And of course, the machine tests them to figure out to make sure everything's within standard operating procedures. It's telling him to recite the principles, which is protect the Celestials, protect the machine, and correct excess deviation. It's like, all right, we're getting right off the bat. These are the main objectives of the whole Eternal Society. And it's like, okay, so whenever something's going on with the Celestials, they're going to go off and help them. The machine is very important. Any threats to that need to be taken out, and deviations need to be corrected. However, that needs to be done. And we kind of see all of the stuff that kind of goes along with that throughout this issue. Not granted that, like, a Celestial gets in trouble or the machine starts to blow up, but we see what's going on. We see the machine kind of narrating everything. So he's in the Exclusion. He's pretty much trying to get tested. He's like, no, I'm not doing that. The machine, talking about how he's pretty much a living arrow. And commenting on his word choices, like asking what people are alive instead of awake, because the Eternals are an eternal thing up until this point, kind of like given the long timeline that they do. So it's interesting that he goes alive instead of awake. So he's pretty much flying around. And Zurus, the Prime Eternal, says that they are of one mind and that someone in the Exclusion Zone is to be freed. And it's like, okay, cool. And it's really good that they pretty much have these things pop up. There's like, okay, there's a story reason for why we then are told what the Exclusion Zone is underneath the South Pole. And there's like hidden in these kind of dimensions within these realms, which is kind of cool, and I like the cosmic element of that kind of stuff. It's like, alright, this is some crazy ass tech. So we get kind of a rundown, like there was this U dude who was the first to be excluded, and he wanted to wipe everything except the Eternals off of the Earth, bringing up other kind of Eternals that have transgressed against the society, bringing up even the person that sired, of course, Thanos, talking about wiping out life with a snap of their fingers, and he is there to get SP, who is the most recent. Opens it up, and they are brought back with their last safe backup, and it's I would go with like a teen girl kind of thing. This is evidently kind of different from teen child kind of girl, different than what their other one was. Like, oh, all right, cool, thanks for letting me out and all that, and pretty much bouncing around like, listen, I don't have time for this shit, come on. And she escapes and goes out to New York, and of course there's this giant teleportation system throughout the Earth that the Eternals can use, and of course Icarus follows afterwards, and she's like, wow, look at all this stuff. They were like apes the last time, and they've got like these shiny metal things. He's like, get off the car, come on, let's go. Of course Iron Man possibly like, is everything kind of good here? And of course, we get the rundown of what had happened before, because I remember this event, the Eternals lost their fucking shit and pretty much murdered everyone. Not, like, murdered all of the Eternals. Like, there was this giant fucking thing that happened, and they, like, killed themselves. And it was really weird, because they found out that their whole purpose was kind of like a lie, and that they were just pretty much used to keep a little on the Petri dish, and of what's going on with Earth, and that the humans were pretty much the Celestials' favorite. This, of course, was like our longer sacrifices were nothing, and everybody lost their collective fucking shit. Of course, Icarus is like, no, everything's okay. Iron Man's like, hey, yeah, if you talk to Cersei, just let her know I'm cool, down to whatever. And Sprite's like, oh god, she's collected humans again. And he's like, no, alright, weird. And as they're kind of wrapping up, we see to them the machine's like excess deviation, and they both kind of like cringe, kind of. And Iron Man's like, everything's okay. You alright, kind of thing? Is there anything that you need to kind of do or whatnot? Sprite says yes. Icarus says no. Then they get on the same page, and he's like, alright, fine, cool, whatever, and leaves. And by the way, I like the take on Iron Man's armor in this because, of course, I've been reviewing and reading the other armor, and I really like how it's done there. But I kind of like the different kind of take that it's on here. It's still similar enough that it works, but it's just like, okay, that's kind of different. So they got to find this excess deviation and see what's going on with it. So they get down in the sewers, talking about like how the humans still mistake them for gods and everything like that, and what's going on with humans now. And then they get down there, and we see a deviant, and it's this giant kind of squid-like thing that's pretty much trying to eat this dude. And the machine pretty much gives us a kind of rundown on what deviants are. Normally, they're harmless, but every once in a while, you get the monster kind of one. And talking about how they're kind of like mogwais. Like every once in a while, gremlin gets popped out, and it's like, oh shit. And ruminating on like what the worst of a species says about a species. It's like interesting because the deviants would then rightly so like, hey, you got some serial killers and shit. It's like, yep, yeah, it's they got it there. But this thing is trying to like eat a dude, and we are told about like the differences that it would have been taken if it was just Icarus or just Sprite, and how they just team up and they just correct the deviation. And of course, they pretty much get the dude out, get into an ambulance. Sprite's kind of like complaining, like, they're talking about like I'm too young to be doing this shit. And it's like, yeah, that dude's she's like probably thousands of years old, so watch out for your like judgment on appearances. And of course, they're like, all right. She of course wants a hot dog, but he's like, hey, you're gonna like Thai food, but let's kind of get to business and get to where we need to get to. So they take the teleportation to get to Olympia to, of course, check in with Zerus. Let's see. And, of course, they at first meet Phastos, and he gives them the information that Zerus has been murdered. And how has he been murdered? He's just lying there, kind of on his throne dead. He's like, well, 5 fingers pressed on his skull. It's like, well, that's kind of screwed up. And we get this other Eternal, Drew, being like, we get pretty much the rationale that this dude's pretty much like how Icarus is an arrow, this dude's a snake, kind of Loki style, being like, since there's no backlog of Eternals, we'll just ask Zerus when he gets back. So no need to do that. By the way, how about we just put Sprite back in the exclusion and pretty much essentially say that Icarus needs to go there as well, insinuating that Sprite had pretty much used Icarus to kill Zerus. It's like, but why the fuck would they'd be back here? If he had just been killed recently, like almost immediately, they didn't get there until then. And then why would you return to the scene of crime like that, like this? Now, granted, we are getting that this is a big kind of cosmic Game of Thrones kind of style political stuff going on, so it wouldn't be out of the realm, I guess, of the Eternals, but we'll kind of see. And let me see. Of course, Icarus doesn't take too kindly and say, hey, you fucking murdered this dude. So he fucking headbutts him and breaks his nose. He's like, I don't make out of threats. Especially 30 seconds ago, you little dick. And they go off. Sprite's like, hey, the distortion is still clear. Like, it's really recent. Let's go check it out. And they go, and it leads them to Titanos, the first Eternal City. And I love seeing all these different kind of places that they've got. This is a big, beefy issue, and they're doing a lot of stuff. But it flows, and it tells us a lot of interesting information. Like, Titanos was the first Eternal City, and that an Eternal named Cronus tried to master time and succeeded in the birth of a cosmic entity that resulted in an explosion that essentially created some kind of, like, time warping effect that had the Eternals killed and then killed several more times as it was kind of going on, and that potentially this time warping kind of thing could potentially destroy the universe. And the machine, of course, ruminates that given a long enough timeline, everything becomes a tragedy. So, having that understanding, we then see that Icarus is seeing something in the future. We see him at a grave apologizing for not saving this person. Sprite's like, have you seen that or done that yet? And he's like, nope. And I'm not going to. That dude's going to live. But then somebody's like, more eternal blasphemy. Everything that lives must die. And there's only one single thing that should be eternal, and that is death. And we see that Thanos is there. And, of course, Thanos is a deviant, and it makes sense that Thanos would be embroiled in this. So we'll have to see. It would make sense for Thanos to have the strength to crush Zeus's head like he was murdered. But we'll have to see what his goal is, if he is that, or what his goal is if he's just wandering around Titanos, or if somebody else has pretty much used him to do any kind of thing. It does make sense for Thanos to be one of the first kind of threats that the Eternals have to deal with, being reintroduced this way because of all of his long history with the Eternals and with the Marvel Universe. Now, granted, I don't know his complete history with the Eternals, but I know of him with all of his stuff being an antagonist with the Avengers and everything. So I'm intrigued to see where this goes. This was a nice setup that, granted, it had a lot of information to give, and I found it to be interesting and done in a way, even though we were told a lot, we were also shown a lot. It wasn't like we had just pages of info dump being thrown in and nothing to look at. We were shown and told things at the same time. So if you're looking at this and being like, I don't know if I'm interested in this, this would actually be a good one to gauge if you are. Now, granted, I don't know how the rest of the arc's gonna turn out, but it got me interested enough to be like, hey, I like the art. I like the writer. I'm interested to see what they do with this, and it definitely has a cosmic kind of feel to it. Like if you're into Thor and the stuff that goes on with everything at the court and all the kind of cosmic stuff that happens with Thor and the Asgardians, this would definitely be an interesting one up your alley from what I have seen so far in this issue. It definitely delivers action, really nice artwork, and it's got an intriguing setup and premise that I think does a good job of getting you acclimated to the world. Now, granted, you do need a lot of information, which is why this provides it in that way. So if you're not into it, I don't blame you for that. If you don't want to check it out, that's fine. It's this. If that's not your thing, it's not your thing. It's cool. But this one definitely has a lot of reading stuff going on through it, but it's kind of expected to make sure that you understand the world of the Eternals and how this team is going to be handling the Eternals. So I'm excited to see what's going on with this and see kind of where this goes. This got me into it enough to be like, okay, I want to see how this kind of rolls on further. So those are my opinions on the issue. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.